Hello and welcome to our 8th episode in the series of our F1 Breakdown podcast and our first of the new year. I'm Jack George May, the news and blog writer for F1, for any of you new viewers. And not much has been going on so far in the Formula 1 season. We come up to testing in a month's time. And, still we don't know what drivers are going to be in which team. And so it's still to play for. It's only two teams that we don't know yet, which is Caterham and Force India are the only two teams not to provide a full set of drivers for the 2013 season. We know that Charles Pic will be at Caterham, and we presume that Paul di Resta will be staying at Force India for another season. He believes that he's staying for another season. But their teammates have yet to been resolved, yet to been announced of who they will be lining up against in the 2013 season. And with testing coming up in about 3 weeks' time, the deals will be done pretty quickly. So, watch the space, keep on F1Breakdown.co.uk to see who will snatch up those last two seats. And we'll be talking about the transfer news, and we'll be recapping everything that has happened over the last couple of months over the winter break to see where everyone is and how it's lining up for 2013. And also we're going to be talking about Mark Webber. We're going to be talking about his decision to stay with Red Bull and how I've sort of read into stuff which Dr. Helmut Marko, one of the Red Bull advisors, has been saying over the last couple of weeks, which has sort of asked questions in my mind thinking, well, hang on a second, why would he stay when they're being quite negative now towards Mark Webber? And obviously he's only have a year contract, and we all know the speculation that he had with Ferrari, and if you didn't, I'll explain more later. But that is what this podcast is going to have in it. So, keep listening. So we're going to start with the Mark Webber thing, because I think it's a huge issue. Well, we all know after the British Grand Prix that Mark Webber signed a contract for Red Bull. And then ever since then, yes, his performances, you could say, have gone a bit backwards. And when he was not signed for Red Bull, and he was his performances were well. He got the win from the British Grand Prix. He won in Monaco. He was really consistent and really performing at a high level. But lately, Dr. Helmut Marko has been coming out with negative comments from Mark Webber, and there's already been talks of his replacement for the 2014 season. And we haven't even started the 2013 season. So, but even before Mark Webber can show what he's got this season, he's already been undermined, and he's already been Dr. Helmut Marko is finding his replacement, and he's already looking at Nico Hülkenberg as a possible replacement, who only has a 1-year deal at Sauber, who has moved obviously from Force India to Sauber for the 2013 season. So, and I thought it was ridiculous. I made a blog on it. It's available on F1 Breakdown on our blog page. I really think it's an interesting read. To be honest with you, I'll explain the bits of it, but I'll keep referring back to the blog because I think it's a really good read and something that people should really look into. And people have obviously been talking about this, but I feel I've managed to get all the links and what Dr. Helmut Marko has been saying and how it's kind of against Mark Webber. Like, for example, after a couple of weeks ago, he said that he wasn't very happy with how Mark Webber drove his race in the Brazilian Grand Prix. That he wouldn't help Sebastian Vettel win the title. And we all remember, the team radio sort of virtually was a team order for Mark to move over. He said no, basically, and the team pulled him in to the pit lane so that Sebastian Vettel could pass. But in do that, sacrificing Mark Webber's race, because then that put him out in loads of traffic. And then by the time Sebastian Vettel had his pit stop, Vettel was ahead of Mark Webber because Mark Webber was held up in the traffic in the Brazilian Grand Prix, which did not please Mark Webber one bit. And then Dr. Helmut Marko a couple of weeks ago comes out saying that he was very annoyed with how Mark Webber drove that race, which for someone who, of course, I can see where Dr. Helmut Marko is coming from in this situation, but Dr. Helmut Marko always has been undermining Mark Webber. And so, like he says, when the pressure is on, like Mark Webber, for example, the 2010 season, the car, he fails under the pressure. He keeps reminding Mark Webber that he fails under the pressure. I thought to myself, is this an environment where Mark Webber wants to be? Because if I was Mark Webber, I would not want to be in that environment where you think it's equal, but kind of the politics of the sport kind of state that it might not be equal in Red Bull, even though Christian Horner always states that it's equal playing field between the two cars. You can't really see it, and you could be saying, well, Sebastian Vettel's been dominating Mark Webber throughout the 3 seasons from 2010 to 2012, but there has been signs where I feel it's not obviously been equal, and obviously the biggest one was the 2010 season when they gave a new front wing to Mark Webber to test, found out that it was quick, and for a long period of time that front wing will give Mark Webber a best advantage on the race. So for the race, they take it off Mark Webber's car and put it onto Sebastian Vettel's car. Now, I reckon most of you F1 fans will know that and will have your own say on that. But that is straight away, you've got to say that there's already been an advantage in that team for Sebastian Vettel, even when it was an equal status and Sebastian Vettel had not won his world championships. So you have to think about that and just think, well, hang on a second. Why is that happening? And then Mark Webber went on to win the British Grand Prix without that front wing. Sebastian Vettel had the front wing. And then you got those famous words on the radio, not bad for a number 2 driver, which I put on my blog. And then you have to think about it. Then the 2011 season, they say Mark Webber struggled to get with the tyres, but Sebastian Vettel flew in that championship. Now, yes, Sebastian Vettel might have done an amazing job. I'm not taking away from Sebastian Vettel. The 2011 season was a fantastic season for him. He was strong, he was consistent, he was dominant at every Grand Prix. But to have a car which was so much better than Mark Webber couldn't get the same results out of him. We all know Mark's a very consistent driver, a driver who can get the results out of the car, even if the car wasn't good. You look at for the 2012 season, he got 4 consecutive 4th place finishes. And Sebastian Vettel got a second in Melbourne. He had that incident in Malaysia. So Mark Webber was more consistent. Mark Webber was getting the results. Sebastian Vettel was fighting for the car, and you could tell that Mark Webber was a bit more mature in his driving, which got him the consistency to get points, even though the car wasn't at his best. Where Sebastian Vettel was used to just having the front, and then battling was like not his nature. Considering the 2011 season, it's like coming into what it was back in 2010 and 2009 when he had to battle for races. It looked a bit rusty at the start of 2012 but then he got his mojo back. You could say Vettel towards the end of the season and mid part of the season where he could overtake, and obviously he can. And the remarks that people do say that Vettel can't race sort of have now been blown over, because we all know he can race and he can pull overtaking manoeuvres. But at the beginning of the season, it felt a bit rusty because he hadn't done it virtually in 2011 season. He literally led every race. And, to win the championship as he did in Japan with quite a few races still to go, it just shows how dominant he was in the 2011 season. But then I think to myself, was the cars actually equal in the 2011 season? Because, and I'm going to put a quote that Dr. Helmut Marko said. He said, Sebastian Vettel will stay with us unless we don't give him a championship winning car. Now, I looked into that and I thought, okay, I know he's talking about Sebastian Vettel, but, there's no mention that we could give both of our drivers in that whole interview that he had. I think it was with Red Bulletin, the interview was just, for political reasons, I have to say that. But, yeah, there was no mention in that interview that he would give an equal opportunity to both cars. It was always Sebastian Vettel for championship, Sebastian Vettel. Nothing on Mark Webber, nothing on equal. And he says, well, if the cars aren't, he said something like, if the car was the best, why don't we get 1-2 finishes? And I thought, okay, fair enough. But, you're getting Sebastian Vettel winning the races and you're getting Mark Webber struggling a bit. And with previous history and what they've done in the 2010 season, it's kind of blatantly obvious that there might have been some team orders, some favouritism towards Vettel. And Dr. Helmut Marko, you could also say, gives a lot of favouritism to Vettel, even when you could say Vettel was wrong in some incidents. Dr. Helmut Marko is always there to back him up, always there to, say to the critics that, no, Sebastian Vettel's fine, it was not his fault, even when, it was kind of a dubious decision. Whereas if it was on Mark Webber's hand, it was always criticism, always, well, why? with Mark Webber now moving to, well, if he moved to Ferrari, he's obviously staying at Red Bull, but there was talks with Ferrari, and Ferrari, for a long period of time, have had a lot of respect for Mark Webber. And I thought he would move to Ferrari last season, because I was looking at this during the season, and, you know, just looking back at what's happened at Red Bull, and I was thinking, it must be time for a change. He's been there since 2007, Mark Webber. But, you know, maybe it's time for a change for him, and a change of atmosphere, and somewhere where he is probably more respected than he is at Red Bull, because he obviously is respected at Red Bull. He's, you know, he's like the people's champion. Everyone wants Mark Webber to do well. Yeah. But just how it seems that he's been treated at Red Bull doesn't seem like is fair in a way. But then I said to myself, even if you go back to the blog, you know, if he was going to partner Fernando Alonso, would he be walking into Fernando Alonso's team? Which is essentially he will be. He'll be walking into Fernando Alonso's team, and anyone who's walking into Red Bull will be walking into Sebastian Vettel's team. So I was thinking to myself, where could Mark Webber go? Because obviously Red Bull is the fastest car. Ferrari, you never know if they're going to have a fast car. You might have a fast car at the end of the season, but like in 2012, you have an absolute pig of a car. In 2012, when they had a pig of a car virtually every season from the last couple of seasons at one stage in the season. So they're kind of consistent, but kind of inconsistent at Ferrari, at having the best car. But then I was thinking to myself, well, if Mark Webber was to move, as I said, to Ferrari, he's walking into Fernando Alonso's team, and if he stays at Red Bull, he's walking into a team which is Sebastian Vettel's team. So the only move which I thought he could have maybe gone where he would have been treated equally was McLaren. But, you know, the deal was already done for him to stay at Red Bull, and McLaren weren't really talking to him because they had their two drivers, and at that point they thought Hamilton would stay with McLaren. If there was rumours of McLaren thinking of leaving, to be honest with you, I think Mark Webber would have been on their shortlist, because Mark Webber is a consistent driver. He gets the results, and that's what McLaren need. McLaren, to be honest with you, already had that with Button and Hamilton. They got consistent results. Yes, they had reliability issues, but if they didn't have those reliability issues, Hamilton, I think, could have won that World Championship easily. But yeah, again, if Alonso didn't have his crash in Japan and the crash in Belgium, then he could have won the championship easily. But Hamilton would have been there. I don't think Sebastian Vettel would have won the championship this year. Yes, he had those 4 great results, but from Singapore to India, but with his competitors not scoring points in some of those races, you have to think to yourself, well, if they had scored points, then it came down to 3 points at the end. If Alonso got 3 points in Belgium and a point in Japan, he would have won the championship. And if he wasn't, crashed off, basically, Alonso would have got much more points than that. So it would have been more of a bigger lead in the championship and a bigger comfortable win for Alonso. And then he had Hamilton dropping out the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the lead comfortably. He was leading. He was virtually leading into the first corner, at Brazil, when he was taken off by Hulkenberg. But he was second, so there's still 18 points. So you never know what could have happened there. But yeah, I'm just wondering now, was it a right decision? Because now Mark Webber, in order for him to prove that he is a quality driver and deserving of that seat at Red Bull, he needs to beat Sebastian Vettel. It might not be for the championship, but he just needs to be ahead of him in the standings. Yeah, if he wins the championship, great, but for his sake. But maybe a move to Ferrari, I think, wasn't a bad idea. But the thing for me, Mark Webber seems wherever he would go, if it was a top team, such as McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari, he'd always be the number 2 driver, because Red Bull and Ferrari have their favourite drivers. McLaren, they've got Jenson Button and Perez now, so there's not really a moving point there. Mercedes, probably a bit too far down. He'd be well respected at Lotus. It depends how Lotus do, I reckon, because they're obviously still watching Romain Grosjean, because they've given him another year, but I think they're going to obviously monitor him. And if Lotus were to come stronger than they were this season, then you could say that he could move to Lotus, because Lotus did target and did say they wanted to win the Constructors and the Drivers' World Championship by 2014. That was their aim. That's what Eric Boulier said at the beginning of the 2012 season. That was their aim. And they had a good start, it was a good foundation this year that they could go on and do it. And if Lotus was to come up through the field, then maybe, and Mark Webber's, he's 36, yeah, so he can still have another few seasons in him comfortably, because of Michael Schumacher, even in the poor car that Mercedes was, he still could fight in that Mercedes. Remember the pole position of Monaco? You don't get pole position of Monaco if you're a bad driver and if you can't cut it. So Mark Webber can cut it and he can perform well. So he can go on for at least another 3 to 4 seasons, I reckon, until he's 40 if he wants to. That's obviously his decision. But I reckon Mark Webber could easily do that. But it's just now really and truly a time, what would Mark Webber want to do? Does he want to stay in a team where he's number 2, really? Or does he want to, he says he doesn't want to move to a midfield team. He doesn't want to become a number 1 driver because he wants to win races, he wants to win championships. But I think it's going to be hard for him if he's in a team that essentially doesn't look like it's building a team around him. It's obviously it's building a team around his teammate. And I don't know if you can win a championship like that, because everything's stacked against you in a way. So I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see. And I really hope for Mark Webber, because I think it was really wrong from Dr. Helmut Marko to already start looking for a replacement in Nico Hülkenberg in for 2014 before even Mark Webber's turn of will and anger. If I was a driver, if I was in Mark Webber's shoes, knowing I've got a year deal and they're already looking for my replacement and the season's not even started yet, that would make me feel so depressed, and really upset. He probably takes nothing from it, Mark Webber, because he's a strong character and he'll probably just brush it off. But I reckon inside him, it might, a little bit probably motivate him. Hopefully it does motivate him to perform and to beat him and to show him, which I really hope. But there will be that, I reckon, that stage when he saw that news clip that, why the hell did I sign another gear contract? Why didn't I move to Ferrari? Because there was talks, and he would have replaced Felipe Massa. But hindsight says that, but we have to move on, and I really hope for Mark Webber's sake that he can prove Dr. Helmut Marko wrong, because I really do think it's very poor how they're handling that at the moment at Red Bull. So anyway, that is mostly what I've said about the Mark Webber situation. There is more on my blog. There's more comments of what Dr. Helmut Marko said that go into a bit more detail. It's a really interesting blog. I've had a few retweets from it on Twitter. People have been talking to me via Facebook and stuff, and sending me messages saying that was a very good blog and a very good idea. So I feel it was definitely worth a read. Of course I'm going to say that, but I would say please read it. It's a very good blog, and I think it gives you a bit more information about how he is actually being treated and why maybe he might be swaying in his mind now, sitting in a Red Bull factory probably now, getting ready for the new season, talking to his mechanics, maybe thinking, is this car going to be the same as Sebastian Vettel? And you have to question yourself on that. But anyway, we're going to move on now. Enough about that. It's kind of sad and depressing, but that's what it is at the moment at Red Bull, I feel. We're going to move on to the team transfers that have happened so far. So just a quick recap of and would it work? Because Nico Hülkenberg, because obviously he's moved to Sauber with a new driver, for new rookie in Esteban Gutierrez for Sauber. He said that Sauber won't be underperforming because they have 2 new drivers in their car this season. So getting to grips, gelling with the team, gelling with the engineers. They said that won't affect them in a way, so they should still be up there. But I hope it works out for Sauber, because they had a very strong season last year, and I think Nico Hülkenberg is definitely a world champion in the future. I have a few question marks over Esteban Gutierrez from watching him in GP2. He was very good in GP2, very aggressive, but I didn't feel he was quite ready for the step up yet. I think, and even he feels now that he might not be as ready as he thought he was for the step up into Formula 1. So it's a gamble from Sauber, but Gutierrez now has that chance to either thrive and either show that he is ready and he has confidence in his own ability. Because I think when the realization that he was going to be in Formula 1 next year, when I think it finally hit him, I think he realized, am I ready? And if you're not going to have the confidence, then you're not going to perform, which I think is kind of a risk for Sauber. But he will probably be swaying as he's in testing and he might build up confidence in his own ability, thinking, yes, I should be here. So he doubts about himself. And obviously, then Hamilton moving to Mercedes, big news. I've talked about that before. I hope Ross Brawn says that Mercedes could fight for maybe a few race wins. He might be on the podium a few times, which will be good to see, but Hamilton is looking forward really to the 2014 season in most of the interviews that he's had, thinking that the car for 2014 and the engine for 2014 will be sublime and will make Mercedes a race-winning car. Perez obviously going to McLaren. He was unveiled a couple weeks ago. He's exciting. I wonder how he's going to come up against Jenson Button, because now Jenson Button is literally the lead rogue, as they say. I don't think they'll be treated as a number one driver like maybe Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso is at Ferrari and Red Bull, but I reckon Perez will be given the equal chance and equal fight. But obviously Jenson Button will be the main dog, as in how the car's going to be developed, and obviously he's going to try and tweak the car so it's more developed towards his liking, and maybe against Perez, because Perez, we all know, is the aggressive type, whereas we all know Jenson Button is cool, calm and collected. Max Chilton, another British driver in the grid for next season. He'll be at Marussia. I'm not expecting him to do much, just to see how he compares against Timo Glock in his rookie year. Charles Pic had a very good rookie year against him, so if Max Chilton can do well in Marussia and compete with the likes of Timo Glock, and maybe if the Marussia car can fight with the Caterham, then that might be interesting, because it'll be horrible because we have no HRT. It would just be horrible to see him at the back of the grid for the whole race, which is not really much motivation for a new driver if you're last, basically. So we'll see how he gets on at Marussia. And then we're still not sure on two teams haven't named their driver lineups yet. Caterham, we obviously know, have announced Charles Pic as one of their drivers, but they haven't named their second driver yet, who will be teammating him. It's looking like it could be another paid driver. I'm not sure who. If I was to put my money on it, if it was down to money, they could put Guido van der Garde in, but I think that's a huge risk. And Mike Gascoigne came out the other day saying that Heikki Kovalainen has himself to blame why we might not sign him up, because how his management is held, and he was being paid by Caterham and he was not being as respected about the team. But to be honest with you, the team hasn't really moved forward, and hasn't moved forward as they said, but they say that because Heikki Kovalainen sort of lost his appetite because he saw that they were going nowhere, they were stalling, that they don't want him anymore, which is kind of a huge risk, because if they do have a car, that maybe next season, if they do, if they don't, they could be at the back of the grid again, which, is starting to get very disappointing for Caterham for all their prospects that they have shown. But Heikki Kovalainen was by far one of their best drivers that they had. I know they had Heikki Kovalainen, Jarno Trulli and Vitaly Petrov. That's the only three drivers that they've had. But Heikki Kovalainen has beat Jarno Trulli convincingly and has beat Petrov convincingly. Maybe towards the end of the season, Petrov did get the upper hand, which maybe because of the lack of commitment, maybe they thought Heikki Kovalainen was showing that he might need to move on and they might need to look for another driver. But then reports have been coming out that Vitaly Petrov will not be re-signing for the team, and Vitaly Petrov is a paid driver. He's not paid drivers in like he brings money to the team and lots of sponsorship money, which I thought would be confusing, because obviously Vitaly Petrov, he's a good racing driver. We've seen it, but I don't know. Caterham, I think, is a bit weird how they're going about it, and having literally Charles Pic, we knew he did well against Timo Glock in the Marussia, but we're not sure how he's going to progress. One good season, he still hasn't really got that experience, whereas Heikki Kovalainen and Vitaly Petrov have the experience. They've been in the Formula 1 for a bit longer than Charles Pic, and if they're going to go with another young driver, is it going to be as good at Caterham as could they get the best out of the car? So you have to think of it really like that. That is it really then for the teams and transfers. I think I've covered them all. in other news, basically, we only have 19 races, not 20, as we did. No deal has come with the Turkish Grand Prix Bernie Ecclestone wanted. To be honest with you, I think he could have taken the Austrian Grand Prix, the old A1 ring, but I do remember races there. They weren't truly spectacular, but it was another race, so I would have preferred 20 races than 19 races in 2013. But hey ho, we have 19, and we still don't know where the German Grand Prix is going to be held. Talks it should be holding at Nürburgring, because they have that alternation deal with Hockenheim and the Nürburgring, but we don't know if the Nürburgring has the funding and all that. You know, all the politics are hidden away why it might not be staging the Grand Prix, but it's mainly to do with money and, you know, the funding to give to Bernie Ecclestone, and that means the race might go back to Hockenheim for the 2013 season. But really, that is it for this podcast now. We have got testing coming up in Jerez in February, at the beginning of February. You know, the cars will be unveiling their cars in the end of January. I think McLaren is 1st of January, and the beginning of February, 1st and 2nd. Most of the teams will be unveiling their cars in Jerez. And then once you know they've signed the unveiling cars, the Formula 1 season is literally back. We will be covering testing. We will have up-to-date stuff on Twitter. We'll just say who's in the lead in testing and who's doing the fastest lap times and what's going on. End of day results will be on the website. At the end of the day, at 5 o'clock when testing finishes, we'll put the results up, and we can sort of start to get an inkling of who might be on top. Even though it's testing, we can't read too much into it, but we'll know who's quick and who's not quick, really, because like most teams, the major players are normally at the top, and the testing timesheets are normally at the top of the races come Australia on the 17th of March. Right, so that is it for today. Thank you for listening for 27 minutes. It's been a bit of a long one, but I think it's been a good lesson, to be honest with you. So yeah, you can like us on Facebook. We can get more information, more news stories directly to your Facebook account. We're on Twitter, as I said. You can get latest information, latest testing updates will be on Twitter. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, because how you can get our videos as soon as we've done one, and it has been our first one of the year, but as I said, not much has been going on in Formula 1, because if I did a podcast after every week since Christmas, the podcast would be about 4 minutes long, so there's no really point in it because nothing has been happening. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll hopefully see you on our next podcast. Bye.